Hello, BookTube. I have a Friday MegaStuff video for you here. One of these videos where I sort of conglomerate all sorts of little tedious bits into one long tedious video instead of making many little tedious videos on a cold and snowy day here in Boston. All the weather forecasts were predicting that after the last 2 days of rain, Boston would have a light dusting of snow in the morning of Friday. And instead, it's been snowing like the dickens all day, and it's heavy, wet snow, so it's sticking to everything. It's climbing up the windows of Hyde Cottage. I have to go out periodically and shake off the lilac tree so that the weight of the snow doesn't break the branches. And it's covering the ground so that when the Bean and I go out for our little walks, she is not pleased. I don't know. I can't quite tell what's going to happen to this. I wasn't expecting it to be snowing for hours and hours and hours. It's been snowing steadily all day long. I wasn't expecting that, and I have not really checked to see what the likelihood is that this weather will go away, that there will be a significant warm-up. I'd have to guess that there will be, but in the meantime, I experienced something that I'm sure a lot of you who live in Canada or the Northeast will recognize, probably with a sentimental smile. Today was the day that the heat turned on here at Hyde Cottage, where all of a sudden this sound, in this case groaning like an airplane engine, that you've forgotten for months and months, suddenly reminds you of its existence. I wish, oh do I wish, that I still had claw-footed metal radiators, the ones that wheezed and clanked when the heat turned on. But I don't have that. I have baseboard heating. It still has the power to send me back sentimentally when the heat turns on for the first time. It's of course insufficient. This is a very, very old and drafty house, so it's the heat is never enough. But I do what I can in this little book room. It pains me to think that Frida and I are going to have to start restricting more and more of our time to this little book room. I love it in here, but I like having the run of the place. But oh god, I less and less like just being cold. And she can't stand the cold. Frida, my little miniature schnauzer, can't stand the cold. She hates it. So, but anyway, I have a bunch of MegaStuff bits and pieces for you today. What have we got here? A little tech update. I mentioned the other day. I mentioned a few times that my quest for one device to rule them all, my constant hunger for new technology of one kind or another. Many of you have commented on it. Seem to have been quelled. I mentioned this the other day in a video because I got an unexpected checky poo in the mail, and it was sizable. It wasn't just $200 or $300. It was something that immediately made me think about spending it rather than just mulching it into a bank account somewhere and spending it on tech. And I realized as soon as I thought that I had no desire because I have this. I have 7 of 9. I got a 2019 iPad, just the ordinary entry-level iPad for 2019, and the smart keyboard, not the folio. It doesn't wrap around the back of the iPad. It's just this fabric skin smart keyboard. So the keys, my S is completely worn away. My letters are wearing away on this thing, and you can see where, like on the space bar, where I still abuse my keys, even though I'm a much lighter typer than I was during my manual typewriter days. But this thing folds out like this. It magnetically attaches to the iPad. It folds out like that. It's fabric skin, and then it closes back on the iPad like that. And the combination of those two things has made this my favorite device in 15 years easily. I love it. I use it all the time. I import more and more usability to it all the time. There are more and more things where I will haul out the MacBook Air, and I will say, oh, okay, I like this device just fine, but my fingers catch in between the keys, junk goes down between the keys and whatnot, and the clamshell feels a little bit restrictive. And what am I doing on this What am I doing on this MacBook? Okay, Thing X. Can I do Thing X on this? 9 out of 10 times the answer to that is yes. So when I got that check, I just meekly deposited it like a fiscally responsible individual because I didn't want tech anymore. However, I have been thinking. I'm not going to do it with that check, but I have been thinking about something else I would like to try. I'm wondering if I can just move literally everything I do onto iPads. I love iPads. I absolutely love them. Have since the very beginning. I got an iPad 2 from an old friend 10 years ago when I knew nothing about them at all. And I kvetched on, I think, Facebook. At the time, I was on Facebook, and I kvetched and said, well, nobody ever sends me an iPad. And he said, I'd be happy to do that. So he did. And I fell in love right away with that iPad. And shortly after that, I started selling Barnes & Noble Nook products when they were brand new in Barnes & Noble stores, because that was where the customers were. They were interested. I had customers there that I could talk to without managers hovering around. Most of the managers at the store when I was doing that didn't know anything about Nooks, so they didn't feel like they could hover around and be little tin-potted dictators. So I had to learn about Nooks. I had to learn about touchscreen technology on the fly in order to talk about it with customers. And the combination of those two things just made me fall in love with this. I think we have iPads so omnipresent in our lives now that we overlook how miraculous they are. I think we do. Or we think, well, I have my phone, and my phone is always with me, and the iPad's just a bigger, clunkier phone. No, the iPad is, it's a TV, and a movie theater, and a camera, and a calculator, and an endless pad of paper, and an endless library, all in a form that I can't sing its praises enough. And I am content with 7 of 9. I am content with this iPad keyboard combination. But I was thinking, what about the 2018, I think it is, iPad Pro? The 12.9-inch version. Much bigger than this. I believe that 12.9-inch version somehow is still able to use this Magic Keyboard. I'm pretty sure that this is compatible, that it has those prongs. The Magic Keyboard charges directly from the iPad. It's not a Bluetooth keyboard at all. I have a feeling that, if I remember correctly, one iPad Pro also accepts this keyboard. The keyboard is an absolute deal breaker. I absolutely need to type on fabric skin keys. I don't want to do anything else. I hate it when I have to do anything else. And oddly enough, you might think, all right, well, your consolation price for a fabric skin keyboard is a normal keyboard, like the chiclet keys that you get on a MacBook. But that's not actually true. That is third for me. The second typing experience that I like the most, as some of you are going to just recoil at this, is typing on the virtual keyboard on the iPad itself. I don't mind that at all. I rather like it. I have a cutoff point, usually. If I am holding an iPad in my hand, whether it's this one or any others, although I don't really tend to go for any others now. And I have some typing to do. If the typing is less than 1,000 words, then I will just use the virtual keyboard on the iPad and not bother with keys of any kind, with physical keys of any kind. If it's more than 1,000 words, then I use a keyboard. But I'm curious to know what that larger iPad Pro would be like. If it is compatible with this keyboard, then I'm curious to know if I might like that larger real estate even more. Maybe it's got a much greater processing power, and as I've mentioned on this channel many times, that is largely speaking to gamers and professional videographers, and I'm not either one. So there's a part of me that wonders if maybe all of that excess muscle would be wasted on me. Those kinds of qualms can be eased considerably if I find an iPad Pro from 2018 or 19 or whatever one takes this keyboard. If I can find one of those for a relatively cheap price, then I won't so much care. Then I would be interested merely in exploring the larger form factors. That might be fun to do. So there's a tiny ripple on the tech contentment front, but nothing that need concern us yet. I'm still over the moon in love. And then I thought I would show you some magazines. I don't know how many of these I've shown you on camera, but I've got 3 of them here that I wanted to react to just a little. The first one was a gift. The Men's Health sent me their latest issue as a freebie to sort of entice me to resubscribe or subscribe or whatever. I must have at some point or other subscribed to them or one of their sister magazines. Probably that's it. I don't think I've ever subscribed to Men's Health. But I was for a long time subscribed to Men's Journal, which isn't so much, the bro science, here are 10 deadlift techniques that you have to try, but rather more adventure, travel, that sort of thing, and some fantastic writing. In the course, I followed Men's Journal from its first issue. Some fantastic writing. Probably it still has it. I let my subscription lapse. But one way or another, I got the latest issue of Men's Health, and the latest issue of Men's Health has Lenny Kravitz on the cover. That is Lenny Kravitz on the cover of Men's Health. Drink that in and then realize that that person on the cover is 56 years old. Surely there is sorcery involved in looking like that when you're 56 years old. But one way or another, I went through this issue. I was happy to get it, of course. And my checkbook is always ready if a magazine wants to please me. So I went through this mainly with one question in my mind. Is this going to be the kind of hyperactive magazine that's written by men in their 50s, who don't look like that, by the way, written by men in their 50s, but trying to sound like their version of men in their early 20s? Is this, in other words, a brainless magazine? No matter how much factoids it's dispensing about the latest health benefits of eating almonds, or how to fry a steak, or what the best bourbon is, or where the best wind skating can be done. Is this a magazine that is for 20-something Wall Street a-holes who get a starting salary of $275,000 a year, but are expected to work, and I'm not exaggerating here, they're expected to work 20 hours a day. And they do. Is this a magazine for them? For stupid people? For stupid young men? The type of young men that... I went into this wondering, and it turns out it is. I mean, it might not do them any harm, but it's not for me at all. I'm not turning up my nose at all at the health, the exercise, the dieting or whatnot, but it's the attitude behind it all. But I will not be writing out my check for $15 US for Men's Health. I appreciate the issue, but I won't be doing it. And then another magazine I want to talk about, I have 3 of them here, but one prop that I don't have is O Reader, a literary magazine. I bought the first issue the other day and went through it. I on this channel, I mentioned that I was worried that it would be O Woke Reader, that it would be virtue signaling and scolding the whole time. It turned out it wasn't that. A lot of the essays in that first issue were companionable enough about, the experience. Again, what the editor-in-chief mentioned in her opening letter, that this is a magazine devoted to the effects that reading have, what the vital place that reading has in people's lives, not so much reviews of the latest thing or whatnot. I love that as a mission statement, and the first issue did do that, and it didn't do anything else than that. It didn't do anything bad. But I don't have the issue because I didn't save it. I didn't keep it. There was nothing in that first issue that for me was very memorable. The one positive thing about the first issue of O Reader is that it inclined me to get the second issue. I will certainly do that. I didn't fire off any kind of letter to the editor. I'm not sure that anybody... It may not be O Woke Reader. That first issue was not, but I still got the strong impression that no one on the editorial team at that magazine would want to hear from someone who looks like me. So I didn't fire off a letter to the editor, even though it's one of my favorite things to do. But I also got the New Republic. I got the latest New Republic. I always forget that I subscribe to the New Republic. I'm pretty sure that my subscription lapsed a long time ago and that they're just sending me the magazine anyway. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I've written a check to them in a long time. But this is the New Republic Vote. Vote is the main mantra of every magazine on the newsstands now. And I ignored all of the political stuff in the first 2/3 of the magazine. I just ignored it all. For my own sanity's sake, I went straight to the back of the book, what's called the back of the book. The last few pages of every one of these political or social magazines is devoted to book coverage. And in the best of these magazines, there's a fairly strong brain-blood barrier between the two. In the best of these magazines, New Republic or New Statesman or whatever, the editor of the book section is not told to toe a political line. Usually, that is true. And that makes them just a godsend because they pay, and so good critics go there. And they review all sorts of good stuff. So I went right to the back. Ordinarily, even in a subscription where I've long since forgotten the check that I wrote, so I don't feel like I'm paying for this. Even in a subscription, I usually feel like that's a waste. I usually feel like if I'm getting something, I should read every page of it. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to read political stuff right now. So instead I went to the back. There, Jennifer Wilson writes a review of Yagi Asi's novel, Transcendent Kingdom. It's a very long review. That's another thing I like about New Republic, is that they give writers a long space to talk about the book. Unfortunately, Jennifer Wilson comes to radically different conclusions about Transcendent Kingdom than I did. It was still a joy to read her review. And then the two other reviews are a perfect example of what you can get when the back of the book writes checks that don't bounce. Critics start to learn that. They hobnob or talk to each other or even pitch. The New Republic would never take anything by me, never in a million years. I'm a faithful and loyal, enthusiastic reader, but we wouldn't mesh as editor and editee at all. I have three sort of informal rules about freelancing, and I'm pretty sure, could only meet at most two. They certainly pay, and they might take a pitch from me. In other words, they might let me pick my own book. But the third, refraining from editing me? Oh, I don't get that impression at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm ever going to find out. I would, and it's also okay with me. As an old friend of mine once put it, I honestly think that you would rather have a book review in every podunk, two-horse town newspaper in the country, all at the same time, than a big book review in the New York Times. That friend was right. And so keep me in mind if you have yourself a local newspaper that runs original content. If they take all their stuff from The Wire, if all they do is reprint and have ads, then there's no bother. Then there's no use in talking. If someone on the masthead has a technical title as books or culture editor, it won't matter to talk to them anyway because they don't run original content. But if they do, feel free to sing out in the comments field, because that old friend of mine was right. I would love to have a book review in every newspaper in the country. But anyway, whether I am compatible with the New Republic or not, plenty of other people are. Better people than me, more talented people than me. And here you have a perfect example of the long and the short of it. One is the New York Review of Books did a reprint of Self-Portrait by Celia Paul, and it's reviewed by Ruman Alam, who has a new novel out and who is a terrific book critic. Just fantastic book critic. And he does a great job on this book, I presume. I haven't read the book. But that's not true for the other review, because Ruman is young. He's at the beginning of his career. And in the same back of the book, we have Vivian Gornick, who is not young, except in spirit, and who also has a new book out. And here she reviews Mad at the World, A Life of John Steinbeck by William Souter. And she also they just give her a glorious amount of space, just a huge amount of space. She finds stuff to talk about in Souter's biography of Steinbeck that, all the other critics are finding stuff to talk about in it. I would find stuff to talk about in it if I were going to review it. But there was, about 30 years ago, a gigantic and a truly great biography of John Steinbeck, The Adventures of John Steinbeck, writer. Truly great. Reprinted as a Penguin trade paperback, and sort of at the time acknowledged as the definitive life of Steinbeck. And if such a thing exists on the literary biography horizon, well, then you have to deal with it, right? You can't just write a biography as if it didn't exist. You have to, and you can't write a biography that folds up neatly into the corners and pockets and niches of that biography. Otherwise, what recommendation would there be for anyone to read yours instead of that? So when I look at a new biography of Steinbeck or Hemingway or whatever, whoever the literary figure is, I always ask myself, all right, what are you bringing to the table that wasn't brought to the table by that universally recognized great biography? And in Souter's, I didn't find anything that was. I mean, it's intelligent, it's articulate, especially about Steinbeck's work, and it makes really good use of his letters, but it seemed to me to be derivative of that earlier biography, only in the sense of how much it conveys to you. I'm not saying that Suter, had that biography open in front of him. I'm just saying I read it and thought, gee, I really ought to read that earlier biography. The name of that author is escaping me, but that was the title of the book. But Vivian Gornick doesn't quite come to that same conclusion, but her end result with Suter's biography of Steinbeck is not praise. It's a well done book, but it feels like a missed opportunity. And I might point out, as long as we're talking about other critics than yourself, about my betters in my profession, Sam Sachs of the Wall Street Journal ordinarily doesn't review nonfiction. He ordinarily sticks to the made-up stories. Had rather caustic, cranky old man things to say about Ruman's latest novel. But Sam Sachs was given the brief to do that Suter Steinbeck biography, and likewise came to, positive but noticeably lukewarm reactions. I feel my heart breaks for Suter, because he must have sunk a huge amount of work into that biography to get that kind of reaction. That must be a little bit stiff. But the third magazine that I want to show you is another one of those literary magazines. I got O Reader the same day at Barnes & Noble. I got O Reader. I got Book Forum. That Book Forum was great. There were a lot of books covered in it that I didn't care about, but there were 2 or 3 that I pulled out and saved. So I tore the whole thing apart. I pulled out things, and I threw the remains of the Book Forum, the stuff I didn't want, to my little schnauzer. So there's nothing to show you. But the third of them was the Critic, the actual print version of a website that I have fallen in love with, that I really like. It's a British cultural magazine with a huge amount of book reviews in the back of the book. So this has a very large amount of political stuff at the front, and I largely ignored it. It wasn't quite as bad as the New Republic, because it doesn't directly touch on me in the same way. But I was mainly concerned with getting to the book reviews in the back, and it was a little frustrating because the book reviews in the back are so UK centric that I was reading them and I was really liking them, but I wasn't noting much that involves me at all. I do not expand my remit to the UK, or I would be buried. As it is, I'm up to my eyeballs in books. My remit is new releases in the 15 or so genres that interest me in the American book market every year. I want to acquit myself well against that absolute tsunami of books. And I think I kind of do. Just barely. I think I kind of do. That would be swamped completely if I bothered with the UK. So I try not even to look at it. But there was something that got my dander up. And it's the very last thing. Literally the last thing. The last page is printed on the inside of the back cover. It's called Sacred Cows. I guess it's a regular column of theirs. This one is by Eleanor Doty, and it is about Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Which she says doesn't hold up. She says it doesn't hold up. That it's widely been regarded as his classic, as his magnum opus, that he himself thought that for a time, but that it really doesn't hold up. Which had my eyebrows climbing up into my head. I want to read you a bit of this, because those of you who know or love Brideshead like I do will immediately start to feel the same kind of outrage. Let's see here. Brideshead isn't a book for a Sunday afternoon in the sun. I have read it on a Sunday afternoon in the sun. Fits perfectly. Or for a medium-length train journey. I have read it on a medium-length train journey from Boston to Washington. Fits perfectly. It is overly preoccupied with Catholicism. Is there some sort of measuring line for what is or is not enough preoccupation with Catholicism? What kind of yardstick are you using here? Anyway, I'll stop interrupting. Even Waugh's friend, the late Christopher Sykes, a cradle Catholic, worried about this. Quote, "I have often wondered what I would make of it if I was not a Catholic," he wrote in his 1975 biography of Waugh. "The book is deficient because solely addressed to believing Catholics and admirers of the Catholic Church. The general reader is left in the cold. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those assertions are simply factually wrong." First of all, you don't know who Waugh was addressing it to. And if Waugh says that he was addressing it only to practicing Catholics and admirers of the Catholic Church, he could still be wrong. He's just one person. So what if he's the author? He could still be wrong. I have lost count of how many non-Catholics, how many people who couldn't care less about the Catholic Church I know who have read this book and loved it. It's ridiculous to say that it's aimed only at Catholics. It's absurd. It's just factually wrong. that those are the only people this book would appeal to is just factually wrong. But it goes on. Kingsley Amis, interviewed as part of a BBC's Arena program about Waugh in 1987, identifies one of the novel's troubles, that, quote, the knobs are seen uncritically, not so much that they get away with behaving badly, as they get away with behaving very boringly. Every time I read it, I say, surely there must be more to Sebastian Flyte than that he is rich, aristocratic, and Roman Catholic, but there isn't. Close quote. That was Kingsley Amis in 1987. Worth remembering here what Eleanor Doty does not remember, which is that Kingsley Amis was slagging in what he viewed as a competitor. In the same interview, he pretty much says that. But one way or another, look at that quote. Look at the obscene stupidity of it. What was it again? Every time I read it, I say, surely there must be more to Sebastian Flyte than that he is rich, aristocratic, and Roman Catholic. But there isn't. Those of you who have read Brideshead Revisited, rich, aristocratic, and Roman Catholic, are those the things you think of when you think of Sebastian Flyte? Or do you think doomed, gay, and most of all, alcoholic? That Kingsley Amis of all people, good Lord, take the beam out of your own eye. That Kingsley Amis of all people should read Brideshead. Read the portrait of Sebastian Flyte, a harrowing portrait of a helpless alcoholic, and not notice the alcoholism of Kingsley Amis, who was flat on his face by noon every day, thanks to alcohol. The absurdity of it. Then Eleanor goes on. In Brideshead, the overriding feeling is that surely the punchline is to come. It never does. Is it a joke? Does it need a punchline? Perhaps Brideshead cannot be judged against the author's earlier work. That Vile Bodies changes tack midway through suggests that the author did so too. At its end, Agatha Runcible is sent to a nursing home in Wimpole Street, where in time she dies after driving out of control at a motor race. In 1930, Waugh converted to Catholicism, and in 1936 married Laura Herbert, a half-cousin of his first wife. He told people he had about 6 children after one of his 7 died in infancy. He died on Easter Day, 1966, after Mass, from a heart attack. Had I begun with Brideshead, I don't know whether my love affair with Waugh would have ever started. I'm not sure I'd have jokingly described myself as a Waugh correspondent for the newspaper I worked for, or tortured my undergraduate tutor through a dissertation on his work. What a disappointment it would have been. Not at all the thing for a teenager or anyone seeking solace in literature. I wrote on its 70th anniversary that Brideshead was a bit of a bore. If anything, it has matured too little with much age. Yeah, because it's the problem with the book, and not you. I spit defiance in the face of all of that idiocy. I don't think many of you are going to read The Critic. I don't think you're going to grab this issue off your newsstand. But if you encounter any sentiment like that, and are tempted for a minute to think that it's true, resist that temptation. Take the remedy that I always advise. Read the book yourself. If you can read Brideshead Revisited and think that it hasn't aged well, you'll probably notice, as Eleanor Doty very gracefully remarks, it's occasionally beautifully written. And never in all of her born days had she ever written a single sentence as beautiful as anything in Brideshead. But she sniffingly allows that it's at times beautifully written. But if you can read Brideshead Revisited in the year 2020 and come away thinking that there's nothing more to Sebastian Flyte, for instance, than that he's rich, aristocratic, and Catholic, well, I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible to read that book that way. And I'm not sure that Kingsley Amis actually thought that either. That quote could easily be a lie. The same as the other part of his quote, that the knobs are allowed to behave boringly. Well, okay, all right, just fine. Again, read the book. If you can read Brideshead Revisited and you think Lord Marchmain is boring, if you think Julia Flyte is boring, then you'll agree with Kingsley Amis. You won't think that, though. So the periodicals were all over the map. But then we have the last mega stuff we can do here is a book. We have one package. It sounds like there were other packages. The doorbell rang. I best get to that because it's blazing down snow outside. It's blizzarding, so the stuff could get destroyed. Oh. Someone has noticed there's mail. Someone has noticed there's a cardboard package. There's a cardboard package here. Bean, this is covered in adhesive. I don't think you want this. Do you? She does. She's, oh no. Don't think that's going to go well. What have we got here? Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. All right, well, it's only one book, but it's a big book, quite literally. It's the Big Book of Espionage. Edited and introduced by Otto Pensler, the legendary Otto Pensler. Fantastic. This looks like a finished copy. The $26 paperback. Wow, okay, great. I love these things. I love Otto Pensler's big books. I can't get enough of them. So this comes out, yeah, this is a paperback original, and it comes out on the 17th of November. So, you know, quite apart from your own impulse buys, right, perfectly timed as a Christmas present for the espionage lover on your list. State secrets, double agents, leaks. Otto Pensler brings you all this and more with his latest title in the Big Books series. This series is great. You cannot go wrong. No need to wait for the government to release redacted information. Otto is ready to declassify confidential matters. So who's going to be in here? Great stories from Lee Child and Charles McCary are pulled from the shadows and into the light. So pull your fedora down, adjust your fake mustache, and get ready to settle in with some greats. Okay, but Lee Child and Charles McCary write really entertaining novels, but they're not greats yet. They're still alive. So who is in here? Look at the list here. I have so many of these. The Big Book of Real Murders, the Big Book of Female Detectives, the Big Book of Jack the Ripper is in this room. The Big Book of Sherlock Holmes stories is in this room. The Black Lizard Big Book of Locked Room Mysteries, Big Book of Christmas Mysteries, the Big Book of Ghost Stories is in this room. There's one called Zombies. It doesn't have a big book in the title. I don't have that one. Big Book of Adventure Stories. I wish I had that. I loved it, and I don't have it. I always mean to look for it in bookstores. And, of course, the Big Book of the Pulps, which got a lot of attention from my critical brethren. I don't have that either. I wish I had both of those. Adventure Stories and the Pulps. Those are two big books I wish I had. But who is in here? Who is in here? So you have an introduction by Otto Pensler. Those are worth the price of admission right there. They're 3,000-word education in the genre under question. He's been reading and editing since the Pliocene, so he knows everything. So we have a Somerset Maugham story here. We have Richard Harding Davis, who's not known, but who's well worth reading. There's John Buchan, of course. John Galsworthy. A.E.W. Mason, fantastic. E. Phillips Oppenheim, oh my. I have read everything by E. Phillips Oppenheim, but he is dead and gone. Though he was once, every bookseller had to know his book titles. And he is now well and truly gone. It's good to have him in here. Fantastic. Who else do we have in here? Alfred Noyes, Edgar Wallace, Eric Ambler is in here. Fantastic. Paul Gallico, Stephen Hunter, Mark Twain, A Curious Experience is in here. Parker Addison, Philosopher by Ambrose Bierce is in here. See, that's the thing you love about Otto Pensler, is that you never know. Nobody's safe. Anybody could be in any of these anthologies. Joseph Finder is in here. A lot of you will be fans of Joseph Finder. Earl Stanley Gardner, of course. O. Henry, another Ambrose Bierce. John Marquand, High Tide, fantastic. Baroness Orczy, Battle of Wits is in here. Arthur Conan Doyle, The Naval Treaty. The Naval Treaty is so good. It's so good. Such a great portrait of neuroses among anything else. Oh, that's going to be so much fun to reread. And yes, I am going to reread it, even though I can probably quote it from memory. And even though I have many other Sherlock Holmes anthologies. So sue me. Who else have we got in here? Andrew Clavin, Charles McCary, Jeffrey Deaver. Ian Fleming, For Your Eyes Only is in here. Wow, 50-page short story, For Your Eyes Only. Sarah Paretsky, a story called Miss Bianca, which I don't think I've read. Of course, you look at the table of contents, you see right away, Sarah Paretsky and Baroness Orczy seem to be the only women. And that is probably predictable, because it was such a men's subgenre for so long that probably there's no way to get around that. Wow, fantastic. All right, November 17th. Well, I'll certainly review this. Absolutely, I will. No doubt about it. So that is our book. The Big Book of Espionage. Put on your fake mustache and read along. So there you go. Wasn't actually short. These MegaStuff videos so seldom are. There you go. That's a MegaStuff video for Friday, a snowy, blizzardy Friday. I've taken the bean out 3 times, and 3 times snow was battering our faces. It's not a lighthearted, left-handed thing. It's a genuine storm. I'm not totally objecting, but still a little weird in October. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this MegaStuff video up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.